The morning mist clung to the grounds of Windsor Castle like a shroud of secrecy, and Detective Inspector James Hartwell knew that something was terribly wrong. He had been summoned at dawn by a phone call that spoke in code words and urgent whispers, the kind that made his blood run cold despite 20 years of service protecting the royal family. As he walked through the ancient corridors, his footsteps echoing against stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal drama, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would mark the beginning of the end for everything he held dear. James had dedicated his entire adult life to the Royal Protection Unit, rising through the ranks with unwavering loyalty and an impeccable record. His colleagues respected him, his superiors trusted him, and the royal family themselves had come to rely on his discretion and competence. Prince William, in particular, had always treated him with a warmth that went beyond the usual formalities between royalty and security personnel. There was a mutual understanding between them, built on years of shared experiences, and James's unwavering commitment to keeping the future king safe from harm. But now, as he entered the private meeting room where Prince William waited, James could see the strain etched across the prince's face. The usually composed royal looked haggard, his eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights and unspoken fears. The morning light streaming through the tall windows seemed to highlight every line of worry, every shadow of doubt that had taken residence in the prince's expression. "James," Prince William said quietly, gesturing to the chair across from him, "thank you for coming so early. I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your immediate attention and your absolute discretion." The tone in the prince's voice was unlike anything James had heard before. Gone was the confident authority that usually marked their interactions, replaced by something that sounded almost vulnerable. James took his seat, his training immediately switching him in a high-alert mode as he prepared to receive whatever devastating news awaited him. "Your Highness," James replied, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. "Whatever you need, you know you can count on me completely." Prince William nodded, but his expression remained troubled. He reached for a manila envelope that had been sitting on the table between them, his hands betraying the slightest tremor as he picked it up. The envelope looked innocuous enough, but James could sense that whatever it contained had the power to shatter everything they had built together over the years. "What I'm about to show you," the prince began, his voice barely above a whisper, "must never leave this room. The implications are devastating, not just for me personally, but for the entire royal family and the monarchy itself." James felt his mouth go dry as Prince William opened the envelope and withdrew a series of photographs and documents. Even from across the table, James could see that they were surveillance photos, the kind that suggested covert operations and hidden agendas. His professional instincts immediately began analyzing what he was seeing, but nothing could have prepared him for the shock that was about to come. "These were delivered to my private office yesterday evening," Prince William continued, his voice growing even quieter. "They show Camilla in situations that, if made public, would destroy not just her reputation, but potentially bring down the entire royal family." As Prince William spread the photographs across the table, James felt his world begin to tilt on its axis. The images showed the queen consort in compromising situations with individuals who were clearly not members of the royal family or their inner circle. More disturbing still were the documents that accompanied the photographs, financial records that suggested payments, and arrangements that went far beyond anything that could be explained as legitimate royal business. James studied each image carefully, his trained eye picking up details that confirmed their authenticity. The timestamps, the locations, the quality of the surveillance. Everything pointed to a professional operation that had been monitoring Camilla's activities for months, possibly years. But what struck him most was not just what the photographs revealed, but what they implied about the person who had taken them and the motives behind their delivery. "Sir," James said carefully, "these appear to be the work of someone with significant resources and expertise. This isn't the work of tabloid photographers or amateur blackmailers. Whoever is behind this has access to professional surveillance equipment and the ability to track royal movements without detection." Prince William nodded grimly. That's what terrifies me most. This level of sophistication suggests that whoever is behind this has been planning for a long time, and they clearly have an agenda that goes beyond simple blackmail or scandal-mongering. The weight of the situation began to settle over James like a heavy blanket. He had spent his entire career protecting the royal family from external threats, but this was different. This was a threat that came from within the very heart of the monarchy itself, a cancer that could metastasize and destroy everything from the inside out. What do they want? James asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. That's where things get complicated, Prince William replied, reaching for another document from the envelope. The person who delivered these claims to have evidence of even more serious allegations. They're demanding that I personally intervene to ensure that certain investigations are terminated. James felt his blood run cold as the implications became clear. Someone was using Camilla's secrets as leverage to manipulate the future king, to force him into compromising his integrity and potentially obstructing justice. The very thought of Prince William being placed in such an impossible position made James's protective instincts flare to life. They want me to use my influence to shut down an investigation that could implicate several high-ranking members of the royal household staff. Prince William continued, his voice heavy with the weight of impossible choices. If I refuse, they threaten to release everything they have about Camilla, along with additional evidence they claim to possess. The room fell silent as both men contemplated the magnitude of the crisis they were facing. James had dealt with many threats over the years, but nothing had ever felt as personal or as dangerous as this. The person behind this scheme understood exactly how to strike at the heart of what mattered most to Prince William, his family, his duty, and his honor. There's something else, Prince William said, his voice barely audible now. They specifically mentioned you by name, James. They know about your role in my security detail, and they made it clear that if this situation is not resolved to their satisfaction, you will be the one who faces the consequences. James felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The realization that he had somehow become a target in this twisted game of royal chess was both shocking and terrifying. But, more than his own safety, what concerned him was the obvious attempt to use him as leverage against Prince William. What kind of consequences? James asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. They have evidence, or claim to have evidence, that could implicate you in improper conduct during your years of service. False evidence, I'm certain, but convincing enough to destroy your career and reputation if it were to become public. The cruel sophistication of the scheme became crystal clear to James in that moment. Whoever was behind this understood that the most effective way to control Prince William was not to threaten him directly, but to threaten the people he cared about and depended upon. James realized that he had become a pawn in a game that was far larger and more dangerous than either of them had initially understood. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting longer shadows across the room where the two men sat in contemplative silence, James began to understand that this was only the beginning. The photographs and documents spread across the table were just the opening moves in what promised to be a long and devastating campaign designed to corrupt and control the future King of England. What do you need me to do? James asked finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. Prince William looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and anguish. I need you to help me find out who is behind this, and I need you to help me find a way to protect Camilla without compromising everything we stand for. James nodded, knowing that he was about to embark on the most dangerous and important mission of his career. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the consequences of failure would extend far beyond their personal lives to touch the very foundations of the British monarchy itself. As they began to discuss their next steps, both men were acutely aware that they were walking into a minefield where every decision could trigger an explosion that would destroy everything they had spent their lives protecting. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. The investigation began in earnest 3 days later, when James found himself sitting in an unmarked car outside a nondescript office building in central London, watching people come and go while his mind raced with possibilities and fears. Prince William had insisted on maintaining normal appearances while they worked to uncover the truth, but the strain of pretending everything was fine while knowing that a sword hung over their heads was taking its toll on both of them. James had spent the previous evening poring over the surveillance photographs with a magnifying glass, looking for any clue that might lead them to their tormentor. The technical quality of the images suggested professional equipment, but more importantly, they revealed an intimate knowledge of Camilla's schedule and habits that could only have come from someone with inside access to royal household information. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "The clock is ticking, Detective Inspector. Your prince has 48 hours to make his decision, or the consequences will be severe." The message sent a chill down James's spine, not because of the threat itself, but because of what it revealed about their adversary. Whoever was behind this knew exactly who he was, where he was, and had the technology to reach him at will. The level of sophistication they were dealing with went far beyond anything he had encountered in his years of protecting the royal family. That afternoon, James received an urgent summons to meet Prince William at a private location away from the palace. The meeting place was a small, discreet cafe in Kensington that the prince sometimes used for informal meetings when he wanted to avoid the attention that came with official royal venues. When James arrived, he found Prince William already seated in a corner booth, his appearance carefully disguised with casual clothing and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding inside access," Prince William began without preamble as James sat down across from him. "There are only a handful of people who would have the kind of detailed knowledge of Camilla's movements that these photographs suggest." James nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "The security implications are staggering, sir. If someone within the royal household is providing information to external parties, it represents a breach that goes far beyond this immediate situation." "That's what terrifies me," Prince William replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "If we can't trust the people closest to us, then everything becomes suspect. Every meeting, every conversation, every decision could be compromised." The weight of paranoia that comes with such revelations was evident in every line of the prince's face. James had seen the same expression on the faces of witnesses in organized crime cases, people who suddenly realized that their entire world had been infiltrated by hostile forces. "I've been reviewing personnel files," James continued, "looking for anyone who might have both the access and the motivation to collaborate in something like this. The list is unfortunately longer than I had hoped." Prince William leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There's something else I haven't told you. Yesterday, I received another communication from our anonymous friend. They provided what appears to be evidence of financial irregularities within the royal household accounts." James felt his stomach drop as Prince William slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements and financial records that appear to show unauthorized payments and suspicious transfers involving accounts connected to various royal household staff members. "These could be fabricated," James said, though even as he spoke the words, he could see the professional quality of the documentation. "They could be," Prince William agreed, "but they're convincing enough that if they were to become public, they would trigger investigations that could last for years and destroy numerous innocent people along the way." The cruel brilliance of the scheme became even clearer to James. Their adversary wasn't just threatening to expose Camilla's secrets. They were creating an entire web of compromising evidence that would implicate multiple members of the royal household in various forms of misconduct. Even if the evidence was ultimately proven false, the damage to reputations and careers would be irreversible. "Sir," James said carefully, "I think we need to consider the possibility that this goes beyond simple blackmail. Someone is systematically attempting to compromise the integrity of the entire royal household." Prince William's expression grew even more grave. "I've begun to suspect the same thing. This feels like the opening moves in a campaign designed to destabilize the monarchy itself." As they continued their conversation, James became increasingly aware that they were being watched. His trained eye picked up subtle signs. A man at a nearby table who had been nursing the same cup of coffee for too long, a woman by the window who seemed more interested in their conversation than her newspaper. The realization that they were under surveillance, even during this supposedly secret meeting, sent a clear message about the resources and capabilities of their opponent. "We need to assume that everything we do is being monitored," James said quietly. "Our phones, our movements, possibly even our conversations." Prince William nodded grimly. "I've come to the same conclusion, which makes our next steps even more critical and more dangerous." After leaving the cafe through separate exits, James drove to his flat in a roundabout route designed to detect and possibly lose any surveillance. But even as he took these precautions, he knew that whoever was behind this campaign had resources that probably exceeded his ability to evade them completely. That evening, as James sat in his small living room reviewing everything they knew about their mysterious adversary, his doorbell rang. When he answered it, he found a young woman claiming to be a courier with a package that required his personal signature. The package contained a single photograph that made his blood run cold. It showed him leaving the cafe earlier that day, taken from an angle that revealed not just his presence, but also Prince William's disguised figure in the background. Attached to the photograph was a simple note: "We see everything. Your prince has 24 hours. The message was clear. They were not just being watched, they were being toyed with. Someone wanted them to know that all their precautions and attempts at secrecy were futile. The psychological pressure was as much a part of the campaign as the actual threats." James immediately called Prince William using a secure phone line they had established for emergencies. "Sir, we need to meet. Something has happened that changes everything." They arranged to meet at another location, this time choosing a busy shopping center where they could blend into the crowd and make surveillance more difficult. When they met, James showed Prince William the photograph and explained how it had been delivered. "They're playing games with us," Prince William said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They want us to know that we're helpless, that they control the situation completely." "There's something else," James said. "I've been thinking about the timing of all this. The way these revelations have been orchestrated, the professional quality of the surveillance, the sophisticated nature of the threats. This feels like the work of someone with intelligence training." Prince William's expression grew even more troubled. "You think we're dealing with a foreign intelligence service?" "It's possible," James replied, "or someone with that kind of background who has gone private. Either way, we're not just dealing with a blackmailer. We're dealing with someone who has the skills and resources to wage a sophisticated campaign of psychological warfare." As they discussed the implications of this possibility, both men realized that the stakes had just become much higher. If foreign intelligence services were involved in attempting to compromise the British royal family, then this was no longer just a personal crisis. It was a matter of national security. "We need help," Prince William said finally. "Professional help from people who understand this kind of threat." James nodded, knowing that bringing in additional people meant expanding the circle of those who knew about the crisis, which carried its own risks. But he also knew that they had reached the limits of what they could accomplish alone. "I have contacts in the intelligence services," James said. "People I trust who could provide guidance without compromising operational security." "Make the contact," Prince William decided. "But be careful. If our opponent has intelligence connections, they may have ways of monitoring official channels as well." As they prepared to leave the shopping center, both men were acutely aware that they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. By involving intelligence services, they were acknowledging that this crisis had moved beyond their ability to contain it privately, and that the consequences would extend far beyond their personal lives to touch the very foundations of the constitutional monarchy. The safe house in the countryside felt like a refuge from the storm that had engulfed their lives, but James knew that even here, surrounded by MI5's best security measures, they were not truly safe from the reach of their sophisticated adversary. The intelligence officers who had agreed to help them had listened to their story with the kind of professional composure that comes from years of dealing with threats to national security. But James could see the concern in their eyes as the full scope of the crisis became clear. Sir Marcus Whitfield, the veteran intelligence officer leading the investigation, had spent 3 days analyzing the evidence they had provided. His conclusions were both illuminating and deeply troubling. As he addressed Prince William and James in the secure conference room, his expression was grave. "Your instincts were correct about the professional nature of this operation," Sir Marcus began, spreading a series of analysis reports across the table. "The surveillance techniques, the quality of the intelligence gathering, and the sophisticated psychological pressure tactics all point to someone with extensive training in covert operations." Prince William leaned forward, his face tense with anticipation. "Are we dealing with a foreign intelligence service?" "Not directly," Sir Marcus replied, "but we believe we're dealing with someone who has worked for one in the past. The techniques being employed are consistent with methods used by several Eastern European intelligence agencies, but there are also elements that suggest American or Israeli training." James felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that they were facing someone with that level of expertise made their previous attempts at counter-surveillance seem almost childish in comparison. "We've been able to trace some of the surveillance equipment used in the photographs," Sir Marcus continued. "The cameras and recording devices are military-grade, available only through very specific channels that require either official authorization or black market connections that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. So we're dealing with someone who not only has the skills, but also the financial resources to mount this kind of operation," James observed. "Precisely. And that combination of factors has helped us narrow down the list of possible suspects significantly." Sir Marcus opened another folder and withdrew a series of photographs and personnel files. "We believe we've identified our primary suspect. His name is Viktor Petrov, a former officer in the Russian GRU who went private approximately 5 years ago. He's been linked to several high-profile blackmail operations targeting political figures in Eastern Europe." The photograph showed a man in his late 40s with cold, intelligent eyes and the kind of unremarkable appearance that made him perfect for covert operations. James studied the image carefully, trying to memorize every detail of the face of the man who had turned their lives upside down. "Petrov specializes in what intelligence services call compromat operations," Sir Marcus explained. "He gathers compromising information about high-value targets and uses it for various purposes, ranging from simple extortion to complex political manipulation." Prince William's expression darkened as the implications became clear. "You're saying that someone hired this man specifically to target the royal family?" "That's our working theory. Petrov doesn't work freelance. He always has a client who provides funding and strategic direction. Someone wanted to compromise the royal family, and they hired the best person available to do it. The revelation that this was not just a case of opportunistic blackmail, but a deliberate campaign orchestrated by unknown enemies made the threat feel even more menacing." James realized that they were not just dealing with a criminal, but with the opening moves in what amounted to a sophisticated attack on the British constitutional monarchy. "Do we have any idea who might have hired him?" James asked. Sir Marcus shook his head. "That's where things get more complicated. Petrov has worked for various clients over the years: foreign governments, organized crime syndicates, wealthy private individuals with political agendas. The funding for an operation of this scope could have come from any of those sources." "What about the deadline he gave us?" Prince William asked. "We're running out of time to respond to his demands." "That's intentional," Sir Marcus replied. "Time pressure is a classic psychological warfare tactic. It's designed to force you into making decisions based on fear rather than careful consideration. But if we don't respond, he'll release everything he has about Camilla, along with whatever fabricated evidence he's created about other members of the royal household." Sir Marcus nodded gravely. "That's the central dilemma we're facing. If we give in to his demands, we set a precedent that the royal family can be manipulated and controlled through blackmail. But if we refuse, the immediate consequences could be devastating for the monarchy's reputation." The weight of impossible choices settled over the room like a heavy blanket. James had spent his entire career protecting the royal family from external threats, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of sophisticated psychological warfare. "There's a third option," Sir Marcus said after a long pause. "We could attempt to turn the tables on Petrov." "What do you mean?" Prince William asked. Intelligence agencies call it a dangle operation. We pretend to capitulate to his demands while simultaneously gathering intelligence about his operation and his clients. It's dangerous because if he detects the deception, the consequences could be even worse than simply refusing his demands. James felt his protective instincts flare to life. The idea of Prince William engaging in a deception operation against a professional intelligence operative seemed impossibly dangerous. "The risks are enormous," he said. "If something goes wrong, if Petrov realizes what we're doing, the consequences for His Royal Highness could be catastrophic." "I understand the risks," Prince William said quietly, "but I also understand what's at stake here. If we don't stop this now, it will never end. There will always be another demand, another threat, another attempt to use our family as pawns in someone else's game." Sir Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "If we're going to attempt this, we need to understand that once we begin, there will be no turning back. We'll be engaging in a high-stakes game of deception with someone who has spent his entire career perfecting the art of manipulation." "What would be required of me?" Prince William asked. "You would need to appear to comply with Petrov's demands while actually providing us with intelligence about his methods and contacts. We would arrange for you to meet with him under controlled circumstances, with extensive surveillance and protection that he wouldn't be able to detect." James felt his anxiety spike at the thought of Prince William meeting face-to-face with someone as dangerous as Petrov. "Sir, the security risks of such a meeting would be enormous. We have no guarantee that Petrov would come alone or that he wouldn't have his own security measures in place." "Those are all valid concerns," Sir Marcus acknowledged, "but they're also manageable with the right preparation and support. We've successfully conducted similar operations in the past, against targets who weren't specifically trying to compromise and manipulate the future King of England," James pointed out. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what they were considering. The operation would require Prince William to place himself in direct danger, gambling not just his personal safety, but the stability of the monarchy itself on their ability to outmaneuver a professional intelligence operative. "I need to think about this," Prince William said finally. "The decision affects far more than just my own safety." "Of course," Sir Marcus replied, "but time is not on our side. Petrov's deadline is approaching rapidly, and if we're going to attempt this kind of operation, we need time to prepare properly." As the meeting concluded and they prepared to return to their respective responsibilities, James realized that they had reached a critical juncture. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of their personal crisis, but potentially the future of the British monarchy itself. The game had evolved from simple blackmail to a complex intelligence operation with stakes that none of them had initially imagined. That evening, as James sat in his temporary quarters at the safe house, he received an encrypted message on his secure phone. The message was brief but chilling. "Time is running out, Detective Inspector. Your prince's decision will determine not just his fate, but yours as well." The personal nature of the threat confirmed what James had suspected. This was not just about controlling Prince William. It was about destroying everyone who stood in the way of whatever larger agenda was being pursued. The realization that his own fate was now irrevocably tied to the outcome of this crisis filled him with a determination that went beyond his professional obligations. This had become personal in ways that transcended his duty as a royal protection officer. The morning of the operation dawned gray and cold, matching the somber mood that had settled over everyone involved in what would either be their salvation or their destruction. James had barely slept during the past 2 days as they finalized the details of their plan to turn the tables on Viktor Petrov. Every aspect of the operation had been rehearsed multiple times, every contingency planned for, but he knew that when facing someone with Petrov's skills and experience, even the best preparations could prove inadequate. Prince William had agreed to meet Petrov at a location the Russians choosing, a small, upscale restaurant in Mayfair that would provide the appearance of privacy while actually being saturated with MI5 surveillance equipment and personnel. The prince would be wearing hidden recording devices and would be under constant electronic monitoring, but James knew that if things went wrong, technology would be a poor substitute for physical protection. Remember, Sir Marcus said during their final briefing, your primary objective is to gather intelligence about Petrov's operation and his clients. We need to know who hired him and what their ultimate objectives are. But your safety takes precedence over everything else. Prince William nodded, though James could see the tension in every line of his body. The prince had spent the previous evening reviewing his briefing materials and practicing the subtle interrogation techniques that MI5 had taught him, but there was no disguising the fact that he was about to enter into a deadly game with a professional who had spent years perfecting the art of manipulation and deception. What if he suspects something? Prince William asked. What if he realizes that this meeting is not what it appears to be? Then you follow the extraction protocol exactly as we've practiced it, Sir Marcus replied. Don't try to be heroic. Don't try to salvage the operation. Your safety is more important than any intelligence we might gather. James wished he could accompany Prince William into the restaurant, but they all knew that his presence would be too obvious to someone with Petrov's training. Instead, he would be monitoring from a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, ready to coordinate the response if things went wrong. As they made their final preparations, James received a message that made his blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, but he immediately recognized the style and tone of their anonymous adversary. Detective Inspector Hartwell, by now you must realize that your prince is walking into a trap. The meeting this afternoon is not what your intelligence friends have told you it is. If you value his life, you will call off this operation immediately. The message sent a wave of panic through James's entire body. Either it was a bluff designed to undermine their confidence at the last moment, or Petrov had somehow discovered their plans and was setting a counter-trap of his own. James immediately showed the message to Sir Marcus, who studied it with the kind of calm professionalism that comes from years of dealing with psychological warfare. It could be genuine intelligence, Sir Marcus said, or it could be exactly what it appears to be, a last-minute attempt to destroy our confidence and make us abort the operation. But if it's genuine, James replied, we could be sending His Royal Highness into a situation where his life is in immediate danger. That's always been a risk, Sir Marcus acknowledged. The question is whether the potential intelligence we could gather outweighs the danger. Prince William, who had been listening to their conversation, made the decision with the kind of quiet authority that marked him as truly royal. We proceed as planned. If we allow fear to dictate our actions now, we'll never be free of this threat. As the afternoon approached and they moved into position for the operation, James felt the familiar mixture of adrenaline and anxiety that came with high-stakes surveillance operations. But this time, the stakes were personal in a way that went far beyond his professional responsibilities. Prince William had become more than just another assignment over the years of their relationship. He had become someone James genuinely cared about and was determined to protect at any cost. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was exactly the kind of establishment that would appeal to someone like Petrov, upscale enough to attract a wealthy clientele, busy enough to provide cover for clandestine meetings, but small enough that conversations could be monitored effectively. MI5 had spent the previous 2 days installing surveillance equipment and positioning personnel throughout the area. From his position in the surveillance van, James watched through multiple camera feeds as Prince William entered the restaurant precisely on time. The prince looked calm and composed, showing no outward signs of the tension that James knew he must be feeling. Within minutes, James spotted Petrov entering through a different entrance. A middle-aged man with unremarkable features who could have been any successful businessman meeting a client for lunch. The initial phases of the meeting proceeded exactly as they had planned. Prince William appeared to be responding to Petrov's demands while subtly drawing him into revealing information about his operation and his clients. Through the hidden microphones, James could hear the conversation progressing in a way that suggested their plan was working. But then something in Petrov's demeanor changed. James watched through the surveillance cameras as the Russian's body language shifted subtly, his movements becoming more controlled and watchful. It was a change so small that an untrained observer would have missed it completely, but to James's experienced eye, It was a clear warning that something had gone wrong. "He's made us," James said into his radio. "Petrov knows this is a setup." Sir Marcus's voice came back immediately. "Are you certain? Look at his positioning. He's shifted so that he has clear sight lines to both exits, and he's moved his chair so that his back is against the wall. Those are textbook defensive moves." As they watched, Petrov leaned forward and said something to Prince William that caused the prince's expression to change dramatically. Whatever the Russian had said, it had clearly caught Prince William completely off guard and potentially put him in immediate danger. "We need to extract him now," James said, his hand already reaching for the door handle of the surveillance van. "Wait," Sir Marcus replied. "Let's see how this plays out." The prince knows the extraction signals. But as James continued to monitor the conversation through the hidden microphones, he realized that Prince William was not in a position to use any of their planned extraction methods. Petrov had somehow gained complete control of the situation and was dictating the terms of their interaction. Through the surveillance feed, James watched as Petrov reached into his jacket and withdrew what appeared to be a small device. The Russian placed it on the table between himself and Prince William, and immediately the audio feed from their hidden microphones went dead. "He's activated some kind of electronic countermeasures," James reported. "We've lost audio contact." The situation had deteriorated from a controlled intelligence gathering operation to a potentially deadly confrontation in a matter of minutes. James watched helplessly as Prince William and Petrov continued their conversation, completely cut off from any communication or support. Then, through the cameras, James saw Prince William's face go pale as Petrov showed him something. Documents or photographs that clearly contained information devastating enough to shake the future king's composure completely. Whatever Petrov was showing him represented an escalation of the threat that went far beyond anything they had anticipated. "I'm going in," James announced, already moving toward the restaurant entrance. "Negative," Sir Marcus replied sharply. "If you reveal our surveillance, you'll compromise the entire operation and potentially put the prince in even greater danger." But James was no longer listening to orders from MI5 officers or thinking about operational security. His every instinct as a protection officer was screaming that Prince William was in immediate danger, and his personal loyalty to the man he had sworn to protect overrode every other consideration. As James approached the restaurant entrance, he could see through the windows that the conversation between Prince William and Petrov had taken on an even more intense quality. The Russian was leaning forward aggressively, while Prince William appeared to be struggling to maintain his composure in the face of whatever revelations were being shared. The moment James entered the restaurant, Petrov's head snapped up and their eyes met across the dining room. In that instant, James realized that the Russian had been expecting him, had perhaps even been counting on his protective instincts to draw him into the open. The setup was even more sophisticated than they had imagined, designed not just to manipulate Prince William, but to expose and compromise everyone involved in his protection. Petrov smiled coldly and stood up from the table, leaving Prince William sitting alone with whatever devastating information had been shared between them. As the Russian walked calmly toward a rear exit, he paused next to James and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Detective Inspector Hartwell, you have just destroyed any hope your prince had of protecting the people he cares about. The real game begins now." By the time James reached Prince William's table, the prince was staring at a folder of documents with an expression of complete devastation. The photographs and paper scattered across the table revealed the true scope of the threat they were facing, not just compromising information about Camilla, but evidence of a systematic campaign to destroy everyone connected to the royal family, including detailed plans to frame James himself for crimes he had never committed. "It was never about Camilla," Prince William said quietly, his voice hollow with the realization of how completely they had been manipulated. "She was just a bait to draw us into this trap. The real objective was always to compromise you, to destroy your reputation and credibility so thoroughly that no one would ever believe anything you might say about threats to the royal family." As James looked at the fabricated evidence spread across the table, evidence that would make him appear guilty of everything from financial corruption to abuse of his position. He realized that their anonymous adversary had played a game that was several moves ahead of anything they had imagined. They had walked into a trap that was designed not just to control Prince William, but to systematically destroy everyone who might stand in the way of some larger agenda that was still hidden from them. The operation that was supposed to have been their salvation had instead marked the beginning of their complete destruction. As they sat in the restaurant, surrounded by the evidence of their downfall, both men realized that they had vastly underestimated the sophistication and ruthlessness of the forces arrayed against them. The real battle was just beginning, and they were starting from a position of complete disadvantage. Outside the restaurant, Viktor Petrov disappeared into the London crowd, leaving behind only the devastating aftermath of a plan that had succeeded beyond even his most ambitious expectations.